Welcome everybody. I think I know almost all of you, but for those of you that I don't, my name's John Henderson. I'm one of the partners here at Airtree, and I'm really excited about this session with Harry. Actually, before we get to Harry, a couple of things. The first is that, as you can see, as we always do, we're doing this as a big Zoom call rather than a webinar. That stems from the dark days in March and April when you guys were all hanging out with us on Zoom and we were talking about what COVID meant and how to handle it. And we've really enjoyed the sort of feel of the community that seeing you all brings to this. So I'd encourage you, as always, to turn your videos on and feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'll try and monitor that and throw the good ones at Harry as they come up. I do have a bunch of questions that have come in prior to this. So I'll do my best to get to all the ones in the chat as well. This session was originally intended to be the launch of our Explorer program. As you would all know, we launched this program a month or so ago to really try and address the decline in angel investing in Australia. And I suppose also to improve the diversity of angel investors in Australia. I think our observation from our vantage point was that angel investors seem to be a dying breed, which is a real shame because they're the lifeblood of a startup ecosystem. And so the point of the Explorer program, in which we would help fund people to start backing companies, was really to give people the opportunity to start building a track record early in their careers and start backing startups when they otherwise might not have. I think our view on that is that if you can get a wider range of companies funded by a wider range of people, then that's good for all of us. And the program's been amazing so far. We had over 700 applications. We've just chosen the first 30 explorers. And so this session with Harry was meant to be the kickoff with just that group. But word got out a little bit that we were talking to Harry, and we had a few of you cajole us into letting you join this. And so we decided to open it up for the broader community, because I think this is going to be a special conversation. So with that, let me quickly introduce Harry. I'm going to assume, for the sake of this conversation, that everybody here has listened to at least one of his podcast episodes. If you haven't, there'll probably be some in-jokes that will pass over your head, but that's okay. I've known Harry for, I think, 6 years now, which, for those of you who don't know his background story, means I've known him since he was 17. And we've developed this sort of incredible friendship, which I think, thanks to Harry working silly hours, has actually got stronger with me being in Australia, because he'll call me at what will be a very normal time for me, like a midday call, and I'll realize that it's 1 o'clock for him. So I think time zones have actually worked in our favor. And Harry, first of all, I know it's 10 o'clock at night for you now. So thanks for coming on. I've watched Harry go from a law school dropout to creating and maintaining the world's best investment podcast and probably the world's best media brand now, investment related media brand. He's gone from knowing absolutely nothing about VC to being a general partner at Stride alongside Fred Destin from formerly at Accel Ventures, one of Europe's leading seed and Series A funds. And he's also got a second fund, the 20 VC fund, which he launched maybe 6 months ago, of which he is the sole partner. And then, really relevantly to our conversation today, Harry's made, I think, more than 20 angel investments. And frankly, if you Googled hot companies funded in the last 18 months, you'd basically just bring up Harry's angel investments. Rome Research, Hopin, Linktree, Superhuman, Digits, Revenue Cat, Bonjour, Linear. It's actually an absurd list. So I thought there was no one better, given Harry's kind of perspective on global VC investment and on angel investment. I thought there'd be no one better to sort of kick us off and talk to us about angel investing. And I suspect this conversation will go in a myriad of other directions. But with that little intro, Harry, thank you so much. I know you don't sit on the other side of the interview table, and I probably got you at a weak moment and you said yes, but very grateful for you joining us and being part of the Airtree community today.
No, listen, thank you for inviting me. It's when you asked me, I was like, I do not do any interviews ever because I'm far too open and just say exactly what I think. But John, for you, I would do anything. And so I was very happy to be asked.
Awesome. So Harry, I feel it would be remiss of me to open this interview in any other way, but to ask you how you made your way into the wonderful world of venture.
Great question. I wonder who came up with that one. So yeah, simple really. When I was like 7, 8, my father was a stockbroker and he used to bring back sheets with public market stocks. And I used to go through it and look for the anomalies in the data sets. And that started a love of finance and like macro markets. And then I got my first Mac and I fell in love with product and product design. And then when I was 13, I saw The Social Network and I saw Peter Thiel invest in Facebook with Clarion Capital. And it was this like amazing light bulb moment for me, marrying product design and finance. And so I basically read everything I could. I literally remember being in a dorm room at boarding school with a kind of torch flashlight, reading Howard Marks' memos. I mean, there were many reasons why I was single, but I think that's probably one of them. And I just geeked out on everything I could venture and kind of broader investing world. And then when I was 17, I started the show from my bedroom. I remember I had $50 and I spent $30 on a microphone and $10 on the domain name. And so I was like, wow, kind of have to do this now. And so I read Guy Kawasaki's book, The Art of the Start. And I basically went through it and I emailed him very, very precise questions. And I put page 283, you talk about X. How do you think about that in a world of Y? And it was very, very specific to show that I'd done my work ahead of time. And he responded like, wow, you have a lot of free time, but I'm very touched and be delighted to chat about it more. And so I had him on first. And that was my first guest. And that was 6 years ago. And now we've done 2,800. And so that was like entrance into venture with the podcast. And then really in terms of like entering venture, I wanted to be in venture obviously for years before that, but it was actually Atomico who gave me my first job. I give them a lot of credit. Our job is to back people with, probably doing something bold and audacious that they maybe don't have the right to do. And bluntly, many VCs said no to me before. Atomico did, and I got turned down before. And Atomico took a real leap of faith on me when I was 18 or 19. And so they gave me my first job in venture when the show was kind of a year or two old. And so that was my entry into venture.
It's just an incredible story. And one of the questions actually that came in from a bunch of different people, Harry, was around your intentionality around the podcast. And clearly the way you've just described it, it was a very, very deliberate strategy to break into an industry where frankly, young people have no place almost. And you've really proven through a unique entry point that anything's possible. Can you talk about the Guy Kawasaki episode? I think, great way to start, but it must have been hard at the beginning. Can you talk about those early days? And another question that's come in, I think Tanya's on the call today, is around how do you build a network from scratch? And you have a world-class investor and founder network these days, but in whatever year that was, 2014, 2015, that must have been nigh on impossible for a 17, 18-year-old. Can you just talk through some of those early days and how you pulled that off?
Yeah, I mean, the first interview, if you listen to it now, I sound like a BBC presenter from the 1950s. And B, I think the content was pretty terrible. I mean, I knew very little about venture, actually. I mean, I read the blogs as much as I could, and I did as much, studying and nerding out for the years before as I could. But actually, the content wasn't great. And, really fundamentally, I learned everything on the job. Like, everything from being a board member to how to think about pricing to how to think about portfolio construction. I mean, the hardest thing about it is everyone has different opinions and views, and so you're kind of marrying the best in the world's opinions on different things. But it was a learning experience throughout, and I think that was what made the show quite successful actually, is because a lot of the audience kind of grew with me as I grew. And suddenly my knowledge was evolving and developing. And I think theirs was too. And I think people have seen that, which also creates a certain element of buy-in from the community because they feel like they're growing with you. And so I think that was, important actually to the growth of the podcast. I think in terms of like building a network from scratch as an angel, it's like, I think actually it's about being fundamentally very specialized. Like when I look at the 20-minute VC and why it was successful, it was successful, in the early days and still today because it's incredibly specialized. We do early stage venture, large part, like that is our bread and butter. And bluntly, we got a name for it in the early days. We built a book of business that we could point to, and then you build the network alongside it. And so when I think about an angel building a network, I think you have to become known for something. And you don't have to stick to it over time, but whether you're going to label yourself the D2C angel or the bottoms up SaaS product led growth angel or the whatever you want to term yourself, I think that very, very specific specialization is important in the early days because A, you'll find your crowd in terms of the people, and B, you'll become known as the person for that space if you're smart around content, which we can get to as part of it. But you'll become known as the person for that space. So with John, when you're doing a bottoms up product led growth deal, you'll think, who are the interesting angels that we can pull in into this syndicate? And actually, if you've specialized and you've done well in marketing yourself in that way, you'll continuously be thought of in those circles. And so I think specialization, and then build your bench. Like you're an angel, you have to build a collective around yourself. So I have 20 VC fund is me as the sole decision maker, but I have 4 partners in my mind. I speak to them every single day, one of them for an hour and a half a day, poor guy. But like that, they are my partners, and we have a WhatsApp group. We share all of our deals, and so it's like really important to build your bench, set the rules, which is for us, whoever brings the deal has complete autonomy on it in terms of their check size and their desires, like first, but we share and we win as a group. And bluntly, between like 5 angels, you can build real mind share and actually real kind of collective wisdom and power as a group. And so I think that's really important to build early, and do not do it on email. Like get on an informal channel as fast as possible. John, you taught me that. If you want to scale relationships, move off email. And so for me, it's always onto WhatsApp, and you just build that cadence of communication, which allows you to really kind of activate the group much faster.
I love that idea of a bench, and that we'll we'll come to that later on, because it's another thing that comes through in our communities. Kind of feedback and question to you is how do you without a brand or how do you get started, right? And I think you've shown one path, which is a specialized podcast, and there's a bunch of ways you can do that. But I think the thing that's less obvious from you, because your public persona is this incredibly well networked broadcaster, but I think sort of knowing you and listening to that anecdote, the magic in what you do is actually the depth of your personal relationships and having half a dozen people close to you that you're genuinely swapping ideas on investment with.
Sure, absolutely. That's key. Like, I fundamentally always believe, like, do the work with great people that you respect, and great things will happen. Like, that is first and foremost for me. There are lots of smart people, and there are lots of different ways that one can make money in life bluntly. If I'm not doing it with people I respect and admire, then I'm not going to be having a great time, and I'm not going to be doing my best work. And so that is like front and center for me always.
Yeah. I realize I've spent 15 minutes now. I'd like to get a little bit meta with you, if I may, Harry. You've done, and in a hope of turning this conversation around, frankly, you've done whatever you said it was, 2,800 interviews. So you've done your 10,000 hours, right? Like, you are a genuine world expert at talking to investors and founders in a way that almost no one else on the planet is. Can you talk to us a little bit? In startup world, there's all these panels and fireside chats and whatnot. Can you talk to us about the ingredients of a great interview and how you get the most out of your guests, and sort of what you've learned in the course of 6 years of doing that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the ingredients of a great interview really are twofold, and the best to have both. Bluntly, it's about narrative, it's about the story, the personality, and how you got there, the thing that makes them relatable and personable, and then it's about the thesis and the strategy. And you can't have a great show bluntly without one or the other. They're very, very important to have it in tandem. And so when you hear Bill Gurley talk about his lessons on pricing, which he talked about on the show, he talked about passing on Google at 100 million, and how it was at that point in his career that he realized that when sitting next to Larry and Sergey haggling over 90 versus 100, he realized kind of the immaterial element of price at a certain stage. And so it's the marrying of like personable narrative and story with thesis that I think drives the very best. And then the very best for me, as I've kind of evolved and moved on, is, and I don't know if it's because, there's a base level of knowledge, which is fantastic and you need it bluntly, but then it's also like this kind of much more personable layer, even further than just like the story, which is like true authenticity. Like, what makes you you? Like Owen McCabe at Intercom, the founder and chairman of Intercom, spoke about waking up every day not knowing whether he had any worth, like at all. And like I've spoken before, I've only ever worked since I was like 17. I've never traveled. I've never had part-time jobs. I haven't had real friendships even. And so when like outside of work, and so, you know, there's a real question for myself in terms of like, I don't take holidays because I don't know who I am without my work. And so it brings up the question of company and identity, and how does one think about the intermingling and the separation. And that would be in this bottom layer, which I think is where I really want to go much, much further with the content, because that is where like true great content lies.
And it's
in
I
my
mean,
eyes.
on that specifically, and sort of to your point earlier, the conversations that you've had and the themes around which you've built your brand have massively evolved, right? Like you sort of talk about this narrative arc and learning on the job. I mean, you started out for the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 years of the podcast, you built your brand on mojitos. And I've sat in the Napa Valley and watched you drink 10 mojitos. Like that was not a made up thing. Like that was a real thing. And then if I contrast that with some of the conversations you've had recently around alcoholism, around bulimia, around, you know, you've really kind of become vulnerable. And I feel like it's both a maturation of your approach, but also a deliberate strategy to get more out of your guests. Can you sort of talk about how you've thought about introducing humanity into the podcast?
Yeah, I think bluntly, it's like you have and it's an interesting parallel between investing and interviewing. And it's the parallel that in the first 3 minutes of either meeting a startup founder or interviewing a guest, you have to create an environment of safety where they feel they can tell you anything. They've just lost their head of sales. They've just churned their biggest customer. They're getting divorced and it's really, really hard. You have to create that environment of safety as an interviewer or as an investor. And the way that I do it that resonates is bluntly by giving first. In everything, it's about giving first. And we'll talk about giving first in terms of deal flow, because I think that's important actually for angels. But giving first to me is like, people ask me how I am. And often there's something very not right. You know, it could be my mother's got multiple sclerosis and she's got a scan that day and it's worrying me. Or I don't know. I have a lot of in the past couple of years, you know, self-worth around being a board member is a big question. And so when, you know, I have someone on the show like Bill Gurley or Roloff Botham, and they're like, how are you doing? And I'm like, you know, I'm kind of questioning this and questioning. It's a great way to deepen the relationship, but it's also a great way to give first and make them feel like this is a relationship of trust and honesty within the first 3 minutes. And I think once you develop that, you just have this incredible opportunity to really go much, much deeper. And it's much different, actually. I always remember walking around a park in London with this VC in London who will remain unnamed. And he was like, my secret power is I ask people, what's the most painful moment of your life in the first 30 seconds? And, you know, at the time I thought it was, you know, strange and odd. And now I actually just think it's flawed, because it goes completely against the giving first and creating the atmosphere of safety. And so you have to create that first. And for me, like, give an element of yourself first, and then it inspires them to give back. And some people don't, by the way. And that's a challenge. And that's a real challenge that I have now, is when founders don't. And, you know, you have a question then of like, well, what do you do in those cases? And it's the same for interviews. What do you do when you don't draw out that extract? And the answer is you have to go off script. You have to actually be a little bit weird and wacky and really try and pull them away from their core. Where I've been in meetings recently with founders where I go like, hey, like, I mean this with respect. I don't want to talk about the business. I really don't want to talk about the pricing. I do want to talk about, like, how are you feeling right now? Because you don't seem okay. Like, you seem stressed. Like something's not right. And it's a little bit jarring sometimes, and you have to be like very direct about it. But I think like going off script and really trying to pull them away from that center of gravity that they know is important.
I wonder if you can, I'd love to go even deeper on that, because, you know, you make this incredible first impression on founders that you back. And I think, I think if our conversation today is about is about what makes successful angel investors. One is kind of seeing them, and then another one is convincing the founders to let you invest in them, right? And I think clearly you're world class at both, and we can talk about the network and how you see them. But you know, if I check in with Alex Zachariah at Linktree, for example, he raves about his first conversation with you in a way that founders don't rave about first conversations with investors. And I think, and I'd love to hear why you think that is, but I think it's because you focus less on the business and more on them.
Yeah, I really don't focus on the business at all. That doesn't drive me. Like, and the different VCs are driven by different things. And yes, I love business. I love unit economics. I love, you know, how do we build leverage into a model? Sure. But like what fundamentally drives me is like human incentive and human motivation, and what drives someone to build the business that they're building. And so a great example of this the other day is, you know, at Stride, we were looking at an investment, pre-seed investment, and I kind of get brought in to do the human analysis. Fred, my business partner, does like the business analysis, and I do the human analysis. And you know, we came back to the IC and they were like, "What did you think, Harry?" And I was like, "This guy is fundamentally incredibly self-aware around how he thinks about his relationship to money." And everyone in the IC was like, "What?" Like, okay, like we didn't explain this to us. And the truth is, again, you can't just ask someone, unlike the show, what's your relationship to money? You go, tell me about your childhood, John. Like, where did you grow up? What did that look like? And they go, well, my family actually, and this is the case with this founder, my family grew up in Ireland and we were actually very poor. We were farmers. And I'm like, like, how was that? And how was that like as a relationship with your parents? That sounds tough. And he was like, you know, it was really tough. And then, you know, my father left and he left me in charge of the house and my mother. And, you know, I had to get a job when I was 12, and, you know, I then had to like, you know, do that alongside school and blah, blah, blah. And it taught me X about my relationship to risk, money, incentives. And fundamentally, like, boom, there we've gained so much more than any hours of theorizing on a market than I could ever do. Like, it's a pre-seed, it's a seed. Like, I'm sorry, 90% of these things, pre-seed or seed, is so transient. That core of what makes you, what drives you to be so hungry, what drives me to be so hungry, like, honestly, my mother, like, in the early days, it was paying for her medical bills. Now it's ensuring that she never, ever has to worry about money again. You know, my family's not always had great money situations. I never, ever want my children to be worrying about their father's money situation and whether we'd be okay home-wise. Like, that drives me. And like understanding that in a founder, it for me is everything. And that's what drives my confidence building, bluntly.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing perspective. And actually, let me follow it up. Let me not hypothesize what other investors think. You know this better than me. You've spoken to 2,500 plus of the world's best investors. Tell me about, and maybe if you can, sort of over time, tell me about what you thought VCs would be like at the beginning, what you've sort of learned about us as a group over time, and then maybe now that you've got, you know, what is frankly a unique perspective on VCs globally, what make the best the best? And I guess, is it sort of this human element, or does that fall away at some stage of investment?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and it's one that, you know, bluntly, we get emailed a lot of things from listeners to the show, and it's one that comes up a lot. And I think, you know, I've thought about it before, and I think really in terms of the best and how one should actually think about being any form of investor, angel or institutional investor with a fund, is really in a 2x2 matrix. And it's like proactive and reactive. Proactive is, I have a thesis that I'm going after, D2C, for example, or bottoms up, whatever we want to go. And then reactive, which is me, which is my mind is mentally plastic to whatever incredible founders want to work on. So we've got proactive, reactive, and then we have internal and external. Internal is, I think about these things in, you know, my home or in my partnership, but I don't share, and I have a very closed brand. And then external is, I'm going to share with the world, and it's all about building my sign outside my shop. That's me. That's Fred Wilson. Like, my content is to build the biggest sign for founders to come to, very simply. And so, like, internal, external, proactive, reactive. And for me, I sit in the reactive external. For Fred Wilson, he sits in the proactive external.
Yeah.
Brian Singerman, one of the best investors at Founders Fund, is in the internal reactive too. And so there's like a lot of, but my point is, there's no one right answer, but I think you need to understand which part of the quadrant you sit in. And just because you choose one, it doesn't mean you can't transition to another. You can be an internal proactive, very theoretical, very kind of withdrawn and within yourself, but very theoretical, and move over time. But you have to understand your start point, because if you don't, you're kind of in a mixture of a lot of worlds. And I think it's why, it's lucky it's just me and you here, John. We see this morass of like VCs who do this content that's kind of crap. And it's just really standard blog post, podcast, whatever it is. And it's because they're not understanding which part of the quadrant they're in and then doubling down as hard as they can on it. And I think the best VCs fundamentally understand that. As I said, Fred Wilson fundamentally understands that. Mark Suster fundamentally understands that. Peter Fenton as well. There's a reason Peter doesn't tweet and doesn't do blog posts. Like, that is very deliberate. And so the very best in the world completely get which part of the quadrant they're in and are religious about sticking to it, if that's part of their thesis. And so I think that's really important for everyone to think through and understand where they fit in that ecosystem.
I love that you have a 2x2 matrix. If had VC not worked out for you, you would have made a magnificent management consultant.
Trust me, John, you know me, I would not have made any management consulting. The truth is, on 20 VC Fund, I didn't have a deck, which made fundraising conversations rather interesting. I was honest. I was like, I would have done a deck if I could have done a deck, but I couldn't. So yeah.
Can I challenge the internal reactive quadrant just for a second? So, and I think Peter Fenton is a wonderful example to talk about. Clearly one of the world's best investors, not someone who writes blogs, not someone who proactively goes out and tries to build a brand, but he still came on your podcast. So there's an element of even these people either slip up or they do specific things. I'd love to hear, like, why did you get Peter on, and why did he come on?
Why did Peter come on? Listen, I think, bluntly, and I'm very biased right now, like, I do not think you want to be in the world of internal, bluntly. Yes, there are some people that can go under the radar and sniper shoot very well in the thesis that they're specializing in. But bluntly, in a world with the capital abundance that we're seeing now, and I think interest rates are going nowhere, I think capital is going to move in at such faster velocities actually than we've seen over the last few years. I think venture is going to expand in terms of capital supply by 3 to 5x over the next 5 years. So I think it's going to get much worse. And so in a world of like capital supply abundance, you have to have a brand, and you have to differentiate to the founders in some meaningful way. It's a game of packaging. And you have to be thoughtful around your packaging, and especially as we look at the next few years. And I think that's even more important as well with the decentralization of talent. I'm looking at a deal now, which is 2 incredible teenagers in Kiev, a brother and sister, who are doing a workflow automation platform for enterprise. And they've listened to the podcast for the last 2 years because they didn't know how on earth they were going to raise money. But I was the first investor of any kind that they emailed, because they're in Kiev and they don't, they're not in the valley and they're not in the close networks. And that is going to become more and more prevalent as you look at the rise of African tech, the rise of minority hubs around the world. I think having that brand is more and more important. And I think Benchmark just honestly realized that. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. Like, Benchmark are fundamentally aware that brand is becoming more and more important. Sequoia are brand building to the extreme. Andreessen are absolutely killing it on brand. And, maybe being internal on brand is no longer an option, and you have to choose your battles. It doesn't mean that they're going to do everything, but if he's going to do a VC podcast, 20 VC is probably one of the ones that he's going to do. But also it's very important. Like, we produce a great package for these guys. Like, if you're worried about brand or brand reputation, I say, hey, we're going to send you the questions 4 days ahead of time. We're going to crowdsource them from amazing people that you sit on the boards with, the founders that you've invested with, your partnership. We're going to send them 4 days ahead of time so you have them. On top of that, we're going to pre-record the show. We have amazing editors who make us both sound great. And once we have that edit, we're going to send it to you. And if you don't like anything in it, we'll take it out. You have full approval before it goes live. So it's another way to build that trust and transparency and make them feel comfortable. They come on and they're like, oh, I'm going to hear it. Oh, fantastic. I'll tell you whatever you want to hear. And absolutely, we do send it to them. And you know what? 99% of them don't make any changes at all. So interesting fact there. But you build the trust and the transparency for the show, but also you convince people to come on. You know, when I look, we've got, you know, amazing guests coming on in the next few weeks. We just had Stuart Butterfield on from Slack. You know, being a public company, brand and reputation is everything. And, you know, exposure is key to, you know, be good. Like our process is why he did the show over other publications.
I think that's really interesting for everyone to hear. And by the way, your early guests on the show didn't get this privilege. This is the benefit of coming on late. I'm pretty sure episode 25 has a lot of ums and ahs and not editing in there.
I think it has a load, yeah. It's and I didn't send the questions ahead of time, and yeah. But it's really interesting though. It's like a network effect of the show though, which is like the content of the show. If you think about it in like a scientific way, can get better and better and better with the compounding network effect that you have through the community expansion. Like 25 shows in, I didn't know your partnership. I didn't know your founders. And it's also a way for me, like, I think people misunderstand 20VC. 20VC is not a media company. It's actually a data company, because with every single person that we have on the show, we ask for the 3 people closest to them. And so with every interview, we then speak to 3 people. So I had Ravi on, who's head of growth at Sequoia. And he says, oh, you should speak to Will Gabrick at Stripe. You should speak to Apurva, the founder of Instacart, and Mike Moritz at Sequoia. For me, my network expands threefold with every single episode. And if you have A players, you're meeting other A players. But B, you can also build this data network, which shows you the hotspots and commonalities within each like region and subsector. And so now I have a data platform where I know that 28 people have referred Rebecca Caden, and that actually within seed and series A in consumer, Rebecca Caden is very clearly one of the preeminent like deal flow source leads. And so it's like an amazing data platform as well.
And so this crowdsourcing questions idea, I spoke to Fred Destin, I spoke to Shaq Khan, I spoke to Josh Buckley, I spoke to Tom Goldberg. So I feel like I've at least followed your playbook in that regard. Coming back to angel investing for a second, and one of the questions that Fred and Shaq, I think probably ironically asked, was whether you can be a great angel without building a personal brand. I think what I've heard from you very clearly there is no, right? Like you have to think about networking and brand if you want to be a successful angel.
No, I don't think so at all. Like you have to build the sign outside the shop that everyone wants to come in. But if you think back to what I said about building the bench, as long as one person in your team's built that bench, that's absolutely fine. I think about building my bench like building a sports team. You know, on my bench right now, there's another person who no one in this room will know about, but is probably the single best thinker when it comes to product design and product marketing. He is incredibly valuable to me because sure, people come through my door because of the sign outside, but I can help make much, much better decisions because he's on my team. And he, as a result, doesn't need to build the brand. He's got the expertise and he knows that the flow is coming through me. And so we're both gaining from each other in a rather wonderfully synchronous way. But you don't have to, as long as you find an adjoinment that allows you to get the flow, bluntly.
Yeah. And what you've built is a hive mind, right? Like I think one of the sort of God complex things that a lot of VCs have is that they either think they are or they think they need to be the smartest person in the room. And I think when I look at you, you know, we've looked at a few things together. You're very kind of thoughtful about what you're great at, and distribution and brand and content are, you know, clearly you're world class. But I think you're sort of open about your weaknesses and you've plugged them by finding the best people in the world.
Yeah, I mean, like honestly, like I'm never gonna know more about you know, a certain space. I'm never gonna know more about, you know, shipping and freight transport than, you know, Ryan, the founder of Flexport. It's a $10 billion company and he spent the last 12 years in it. So like honestly, for me, the question of how do I have a relationship that is as close with him that I can ping him on WhatsApp and have him on the phone with the founder in an hour or a day. And bluntly, he's going to get a lot more out of it than me. And I can leverage his knowledge in a way that he will leverage mine in terms of thinking about building out a content platform and his own personal brand. But for me, it's like, I don't need to know the answer, but I need to know someone who has the world-class answer.
Yeah.
Sorry, just say one thing on the deal flow for angels. The thing I think people like often forget with angel deal flow or just deal flow more generally is like, this is a tradable asset. This is like a commodity that you exchange with one another. And it's like, people go, oh, I haven't been sent deals. And it's like, how many deals have you sent? I spend 90 minutes a day sending deals to different people, like, and a lot of time, because it keeps you top of mind. You're never going to get anything back unless you give first. And it just keeps you front and center as like the nucleus of this kind of live network of deals. And so like, just be incredibly proactive about sending first with no expectation of it coming back. It will do it 90% of the time, but like, it's a tradable asset and it's a currency. You have to work it.
I think that if we leave with nothing else, that is such a spectacular insight for this group. And it's part of the foundation of what we're trying to do with the Explorer program as well. Just with this audience in mind, being a bunch of people who've either made a very small number of angel investments or are sort of thinking about how to get into that, I'd love you to talk to kind of when you started angel investing, how you just sort of the mechanics of how do you think about, you know, what portion of your wealth to put into it, check size, portfolio size, all that kind of stuff. And you've spoken to, you know, the best of the best on this. General lessons on thinking about angel investing from the beginning.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of age old adages. Like, I'm super happy to be kind of very transparent about numbers. At the time, I had like, I think about $500,000, and I thought like, okay, I don't own any properties or anything else, like, and I have a very low cost of lifestyle. And so I was thinking, okay, like if I put 20% into angel investing, that's an amount where if I lose it, it's painful and I'll feel it, but I'm going to be okay. I'm still going to be able to pay bills and life will be fine. And so I think it's just around determining your level of risk in that respect. Some people is, you know, 50 to 60%. If you speak to Lee Fixel Edition, he'll say it's 100% plus. I mean, Lee will go into leverage and debt because he's so into, you know, bought into the asset class, which is amazing. And it's testament to his like investment like style. For me, with family, with mum and her MS and paying medication and stuff, that wasn't the case. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong, but just understanding your risk levels. For me, it was 20%. And then bluntly, it was like, okay, twofold here, which is like, how do I get enough diversification in the core base? One. And then two is like, so how do I get enough diversification in the core base first? For me, it was like 10 deals of 10K each. Why? Because 10K out of a 100K pool, the upside, actually, you're going to see some really great returns. Like, it's not, if you put 1K from a 100K pool, it's, you know, it's going to be really tough to make that look good. And then second, and people don't do this, and I'm so shocked by how few angels do this, just have a consistent check size. It doesn't matter what it is, but have a consistent check size and make it known to the audience, to your co-investors, to funds, what that check size is, because then you'll be held like accountable to that and they'll think of you with that one. What people do is they write a 75K check and a 25K check, and actually your conviction levels are kind of all over the place right now, and you'll find that the biggest winners are your smallest checks, and you know, the biggest losers are your biggest checks. But bluntly also, you get funds like, you know, I've had this before where funds go, oh, Harry's written 100K checks before, sure, but I've seen him write 20K checks too. We can push him down to 20 because he's done it before. No. I write 25K checks consistently, or I write 50K checks. Don't let that kind of vulnerability be shown, because people will cram you, especially in capital abundant markets. So be very disciplined around that in my eyes, and then just build enough diversification in the core pool. For me, it was 10. I would probably say it should be more. It probably should be 15 to 20. For me, I was kind of lucky. I rode on the coattails of a couple of people with a couple of the first few. Yeah, so I think that's like crucial.
I think that's such great advice. And I think the point you're making, that you get pushed down on the good ones and pushed up on the bad ones, who knows if that plays out over time, but that's certainly the dynamic in a bunch of rounds where I see people say, I'm going to put 20K in, and then you know, the round is struggling to get closed and they go up on the ones that can't close and down on the ones that can. It's a real problem.
And then also like speed, like honestly, this is a founders market. Just be quick. You will be in shock at how much conviction and true belief resonates. I've got into some of the best and most competitive deals recently. And it's not because of anything bluntly to admit, it's because I'm very excited about what they're doing. I totally see it with them in the call. And I'm like, I am in. I would love to invest X amount. Count me in. I'm part of your team. And it's like, great, fantastic. People that came 2 days later, having thought about the market, having analyzed the competitive landscape, they didn't get in. And so speed is a massive differentiator right now. Like, and also like price as well. The amount of times I see angels kind of, you know, going, oh, we're doing it at 4, but it's at 6. So, and yeah, price is important, but honestly, 4 or 6 or even 20, 30, as an angel, it really doesn't matter. As a fund, you have to be a lot more disciplined. And I see that with Stride, and, you know, I'm sure you see that with Atri. But as an angel, honestly, like, I wouldn't spend too much time on the price.
Yeah, I think the other thing to say about price is that at Angel, you don't set it anyway. So it's more of a binary decision of, are you in at the price that the round is getting done, rather than you thinking about setting that price.
Yeah. Also, the thing I do is like fundamentally choose 2 or 3 founders. Obviously, you want to help all your founders, but like choose 2 or 3 where you just will do anything for them any time of day. And if they were to give you a reference, it would be like, oh my God, I want Harry to lead my next round, and my company would not be the same without Harry. You just get 2 or 3. The rest, and I don't mean this badly or commoditizing other fans, the rest have to be good. But like have 2 or 3 where it's like, oh my God, he was amazing or she was amazing, and they are the best in the world. And, you know, I absolutely do that with mine today, where there's 2 or 3 where they'll call at 3 a.m. and like whatever they need, anything, anytime, I'll make happen. One of them, you know, just had needed a domain name from Mark Cuban. Like, you know, I'm doing my best to make it happen. We'll see where that lands. But like, I'll do anything for that. And it's really important to get those references.
Hey, I'm just mindful of time, and there's a bunch of great questions coming in on the chat. I just want to rattle through a couple of them. One that I think is really interesting from Matt Allen on this deal referral point, and I think you've made a great insight that people should really listen to around, you know, sharing deals and swapping insights on them being kind of a critical factor in a good angel. Matt's asking whether you refer deals that you're not investing, and if so, how you manage signaling risk.
Yeah, no, I mean, I often refer deals that I'm not investing in. It's like the majority. And the answer is often because I don't feel passionate about a space. Like, you know, as I said, I'm very like kind of passion oriented, either founder or space itself. And like, just because I don't like something doesn't mean someone else doesn't. You know, I know lots of people that hate, you know, gnarly elements of like enterprise, like compliance management. I love compliance management. Again, probably another reason I'm single. But like, you know, compliance and how it integrates with Salesforce and how you create like seamless workflows around it, you know, between SMB to enterprise, that's really interesting to me. Some people find it really boring, but it may be interesting, so we'll send it to Harry. Great, fantastic. So, and then there are other things where I'm like, oh, you know, I just really don't get. I really don't like businesses, bluntly, where it's like there's 10 others in the space, like N of 1. Do you know what I mean? It's like another challenger bank, another, I don't know, marketplace for walk your dogs. I don't know what it is, but like that, I'm like, but I know, and I'm not being rude, there's some great businesses to be built there. So I'm probably an idiot, but like, it's just not my type of deal. But I know that there's someone else in the ecosystem who loves thinking about liquidity in hyperlocal marketplaces. And actually, it's really important to send it to them, because even if they don't like it, I'm still thinking about them and they'll still remember that. It's often not about the material that you send, it's about the thought and the process that you got to send it. And that's what people remember. Oh, Harry thought about me like that. That was very kind of him, actually. I really appreciated that. And so I think I wouldn't worry about the signaling. And people like different things. And as long as you're open and transparent about it, I think people just resonate with it.
Yeah, and that example speaks to this data business point, that you need to actually know what excites people and what's going to get them going to be.
Exactly, yeah. Specialization and being vocal about it means that, you know, X is really interested in, you know, hyperlocal marketplaces.
Another question that I don't know if you'll have a perspective on, but I think is interesting to this audience has come in from Stuart. He talks about the sort of Calacanis mantra that if you're not in Silicon Valley, you've got no hope because it's a mature market and that's where the big outcomes are, at least from an angel perspective. And Stuart's question was, what do you think about the potential for angel investment in less mature markets? He says Australia is an example, but pick any that you're familiar with. I'd love to hear your thoughts on angel investing outside of Silicon Valley.
Are you saying like angel investing in companies, or like, are you saying like you have to be in Silicon Valley to angel invest well? Or are you saying, help me out here?
Well, so question's a little ambiguous, but let's read the question as you have to invest in Silicon Valley companies because they're the only ones that get big enough.
I mean, that's just total crap. Like it's just rubbish. I think with the decentralization of talent, with the kind of plug and play resources and tools that we have at our disposal today, from accounting and finance to compliance to HR to payroll, anyone can build a business anywhere. We know that the cost of building a business has gone down dramatically. We know that information like asymmetry has reduced with podcasts, with blogcasts, with educational tools. Like it's just crap that it needs to be in Silicon Valley. Does it mean that it's going to like leave forever? Like I'm not saying Silicon Valley is dead, but to say you have to invest in Silicon Valley to be successful, or big businesses won't be built or founded outside of it, it's just nonsense. And so I really, I understand why people in the Valley say it, because it's part of the talent attraction magnet. It's part of the brain drain. Remember that Silicon Valley is a marketing experiment. It is a marketing tool, and they are building their shop sign too. They want the world's greatest technical talent to come to Silicon Valley. And if it stays in Sydney, that is very suboptimal for them. And so that's why they continuously promote it. And I would do the same. It's a smart strategy. But like, I think that's just part of their kind of brain drain strategy.
So I'm so pleased you gave that answer. And I'm literally, I don't know how Zoom chooses its people on screen, but I've got Seb Ruiz from Canva on my screen and John Kim from McLeod Guru, who are, clear counter examples to that. So I'm pleased to hear
Exactly.
A clarification though on that question, and I think you've given the answer, but just to repeat it, Mike has said that Jason's point was that you need to be in Silicon Valley to get proper deal flow, which I think I can answer for you is ridiculous, right? Like you're sitting in London and look at the deals you've backed.
If I could tell you the amount of amazing investors that have left the Valley in the last 3 months, that you would be so shocked. I would actually bet you, if you gave me 3 massive names in venture, 2 of 3 would all have left. Honestly, I'm struggling to know anyone still in the Valley. Well, short term, it's for the next 12 months. But your big names, if you've got enough dollars, are not in the Valley right now.
Do you think we've left our investment in the New Zealand property market too late?
I think there's a perfect time to come.
Hey, since we're short on time, I might switch to a question about time, actually. Our mutual friend, Christoph Jantz over at Point Nine, sent sort of a joking tweet, but I thought it was a good question. You've got, I actually don't know what you've got on your plate these days. You've got a world-leading podcast. I don't know if you're still doing SaaStr. You've got Stride, in which you're a GP. You've got 20 VC, in which you're the only decision maker. You call me at 1 o'clock in the morning on a regular basis. How do you manage your time, and when do you sleep?
I always think this is funny because it's like, it's amazing to me how like it doesn't work for everyone, and like I lead a very, I'm sure, shallow and sad life in many respects. I don't have much else in my life other than work. Like I'm sure everyone here has much richer and more fulfilling lives than me in many respects. So like my point with that incredibly deep comment is like, I just work 7 days a week and 12 hours a day. And when you give yourself 2 extra days a week, fully 12, 14 hours, then actually you can just do a lot more. And, honestly, the truth is, as I said at the beginning, this is all I've done for so many years. I don't know like what to do without it. Like I go to the gym, but like if you give me like an afternoon off, the other morning I worked so hard so I could have like 2 hours off in the afternoon. And I pictured myself with my orange juice and my paper sitting on my balcony and won't this be a wonderful afternoon? I got on the balcony and in 5 minutes I was bored shitless. And I was going, what? There's emails piling up. I'm really not that interested about whatever this, I don't know, whoever it was doing in the paper. I'll just go back to my desk now. And so like for me, it's just like there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. In terms of how I structure my day, it's super simple. I get up at 6, I walk with my mother for 3 hours. It's a long walk. We do 15 miles, and she's great. She's like the reason that I do so much what I do. She's got MS. She's a hero. So I do that 6 to 9, 9 to 1. I just work straight cranking emails. Emails are really tough because of the kind of brand of the show. You get a lot. And then like I have a brain condition as well, so I can't do much cognitive thought in the morning, like board meetings or like calls really. So I don't do that. So 9 to 1, I do email, admin, clear shit off. 1 to 2, I do a hard Peloton session. 2 to 7, I do like, you know, calls back to back. I try and do 45-minute calls with 15-minute. People like are so into this like half hour call, and they just end up turning up like frazzled and late and not suboptimal. So I do 45-minute calls and I leave a 15-minute buffer in case it's great and I want to go over. And if it's not, then great, I can grab a coffee. And then at 7, I go to the gym. I'm there for 45 minutes for a weight session. 8 o'clock, like I sit, eat dinner. And then 9, we work again until 1. And that's kind of how I do it. And then I'll normally do an interview 10 and 11 in the evening. And then I'll do work 9 to 10 and 12 to 1. And then I call you at 1 and irritate you in the middle of your morning.
So, I mean, I think that's both a depressing and exciting answer, actually. I think for the people who are actively looking for work-life balance and whatnot, I think that's probably not the example that they want to follow. But I think the positive spin I would put on that is...
You've also got to remember that there's 5 hours of exercise in there.
There's 5 hours of exercise, but also, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth here, but you found your passion, right? Like, I don't think when I look at you that you consider the time you spend at work to be kind of working per se.
No, I love it. I choose to. I don't have to do all of that. Like, I don't have to do the stuff in the evening. I mean, I just rather do that, you know? I finished Narcos on Netflix, so like, that's over. So yeah, no, but you don't know. And so I don't think it actually has to be a depressing for other people, because the 5 hours is, you know, bluntly unnecessary and you don't need to do that. 1 hour on the Peloton is enough for most people 3 times a week, let alone, you know. So I'm just ridiculous in that respect. But like, so I would forget that. And then you can just be much more efficient around your time. And am I actually that efficient around the hours that I'm in? Yeah, but you know, you can be more efficient. You know, I think people also fundamentally misunderstand email. And I'm an investor in Superhuman, and I obviously love the Superhuman product. But email is a craft, and email is a lost craft. And I think one thing that people will say about me is actually that I email very nicely, and mine are always actually very personalized and kind of crafted. And it's not a transaction mechanism for me. This is an opportunity to build a relationship, not to bash through to inbox zero. And I think that it takes me longer to do my email. But point being, there are a lot of things I do which actually take longer and are suboptimal in terms of like time and productivity. So if you have kids and you have family, you can still crank out the same productivity wise, but just in much less time.
Yeah. Hey, Harry, you talked there about scheduling for calls for 45 minutes and then leaving 15 in case it's great. I did exactly that for this call. We're coming up on 11, 12 minutes over time now because you've had so much to say. And I think incredible insights into, you know, we wanted to talk about angel investing, but I feel like we've covered content, we've covered brand, we've covered lessons from investing, we've covered, you know, time management. I think there's a bunch to take away from this. Again, I know you don't do these, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of our community today. It's been awesome having you.
Honestly, like, thank you so much for having me. And you know, angel investing has been one of the most rewarding parts of my life. And so the only thing I'd say is like, absolutely do it. And I think also the relationship that you can build with the founders is so special. As an angel, sometimes more than as a VC in certain cases. And so like, I would just encourage everyone to be as active as possible.
Awesome. Thanks everyone so much. And we will be back in a couple of weeks with another one of these sessions.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.